I need you to tell Mark, Clara pleaded. Rachel's smile was cold and calculated. And what will you tell him? She replied, that his sister has been Fing his wife, that his child is not his own. In the quiet town of Elmswood, nestled between the whispers of the forest and the hum of the distant highway, lived a young woman named Clara. She had a heart as warm as a summer's day, eyes that danced with the secrets of 1,000 untold stories, and a smile that could charm the most stoic of souls. Clara's life was simple, filled with the gentle rhythms of her job at the local bookstore and the quiet companionship of her cat, Mr. Whiskers. She had always dreamed of a love that would sweep her off her feet, a love that would complete the picture-perfect life she had meticulously painted in her mind. Her dreams became reality when she met Mark, a charming, albeit somewhat mysterious man who owned the bookstore. Their romance was a whirlwind of shared laughs, late-night book discussions, and stolen kisses amidst the dusty bookshelves. It wasn't long before they found themselves standing at the altar, exchanging vows of eternal love and devotion. What Clara didn't know, however, was that Mark came with a surprise package, his sister Rachel, who was to live with them after the wedding. Rachel was quieter than Mark, with a gentle demeanor that Clara found both comforting and slightly intimidating. She had an enigmatic allure that Clara couldn't quite put her finger on. The first few weeks of their new life together passed in a blur of wedded bliss and the excitement of setting up their home. Rachel, ever the polite houseguest, kept mostly to herself, often retreating to her room or spending hours in the garden tending to the plants with a dedication that bordered on obsession. Clara had noticed Rachel's tendencies to keep her personal space meticulously organized and her clothes impeccably folded, but she chalked it up to Rachel's quirks and didn't think much of it. One fateful evening, after a particularly long day at the store, Clara decided to indulge in a hot bath. She drew the curtains, filling the room with the scent of lavender bubbles, and slipped into the water with a contented sigh. As she closed her eyes and allowed the warmth to seep into her bones, she heard the door creak open. Startled, she peeked through the steam to find Rachel standing in the doorway, completely naked. Her heart hammered in her chest as Rachel approached the tub, her gaze intense and unyielding. Clara's eyes widened when she realized Rachel had a dick, a fact that Mark had never mentioned. Rachel stepped closer, the water droplets from the steamy air kissing her bare skin as she did. "I know you're surprised," Rachel murmured, her voice a seductive purr that sent chills down Clara's spine. "But you're my brother's wife now, and I claim what's his." With a swiftness that belied her grace, Rachel climbed into the tub, her body pressing against Clara's, forcing her back against the cold porcelain. Clara's protests were silenced by Rachel's hungry kiss, her mind reeling as she grappled with the realization that Rachel was, in fact, Rachel. The line between shock and arousal blurred as Rachel's hands roamed her body, claiming her in a way she had never been claimed before. Clara felt powerless to resist, her body betraying her as it responded to Rachel's insistent touch. The weeks that followed were a tumultuous blend of fear, confusion, and a strange, forbidden attraction. Each night, as Mark slept soundly, Rachel would slip into their room, her presence unmistakable in the moonlit darkness. Clara found herself torn between her love for Mark and the undeniable pull she felt toward Rachel's raw, unbridled passion. Rachel was relentless in her pursuit, leaving Clara no choice but to submit to her desires, night after night. As the months went by, Clara's body began to change. Her breasts grew fuller, her stomach softened, and she felt a new life growing within her. The signs were unmistakable, she was pregnant. But with each flutter of life, a cold dread grew in her stomach, for she knew the truth, that Mark would never suspect the child she carried was not his. It was Rachel's. And as Clara stared at her reflection in the mirror, she realized that she was now trapped in a web of deceit, her heart torn between the love she had for her husband and the secret that now bound her to her sister-in-law in the most intimate of ways. Rachel noticed the shift in Clara's demeanor, her eyes holding a newfound sadness that hadn't been there before. She knew what Clara was feeling, the guilt that came with their clandestine encounters, but she felt no remorse. Instead, she was fueled by a possessive need to claim Clara fully as her own. Rachel had always been jealous of Mark's relationships, feeling that she was the one who truly understood him. Now, with Clara carrying her child, Rachel felt a sense of victory she had never known. The tension grew thick in the house, a silent battle raging between the two women, unbeknownst to the oblivious Mark. Rachel's visits to Clara's bedroom grew more frequent, her touch more demanding as she sought to assert her dominance. Clara, for her part, vacillated between anger and despair, her thoughts consumed by the thought of the life growing inside her and the woman who had planted it there without her consent. Yet, amidst the tumult, she felt a strange kinship with Rachel, a bond forged in the heat of passion and the shared secret they now carried. One night, as Rachel's hands explored Clara's swollen belly, Clara found the strength to confront her. "You can't do this to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Rachel looked up, her eyes dark with desire and something else, something Clara hadn't seen before: desperation. "I need you to tell Mark," Clara pleaded. Rachel's smile was cold and calculated. "And what will you tell him?" she replied. "That his sister has been his wife, that his child is not his own?" Her face, as Rachel leaned in to kiss her neck, her teeth grazing the soft skin. "You're mine, Clara," Rachel murmured, "and you always will be." The months passed in a blur of fear and longing. Clara's love for Mark remained unshaken, but she couldn't ignore the magnetic pull Rachel held over her. The situation grew more complicated with each passing day, a tangled mess of love, lust, and betrayal. And as Clara felt the baby kick for the first time, she knew she had to find a way out, to tell Mark the truth before it was too late. But Rachel was always there, a constant reminder of the dark secret they shared, her eyes promising retribution if Clara ever dared to break their silent pact. Clara felt like a pawn in a twisted game, her every move dictated by Rachel's whims, yet deep down, she harbored a spark of hope that somehow she could find a way to reclaim her life and her love before the truth came to light. The night she chose to confront Mark was stormy, the thunder outside mirroring the tempest within her soul. She found him in his study, the warm light of the lamp casting shadows across his furrowed brow as he worked late into the night. With trembling hands, Clara told him everything about Rachel's true nature, their illicit encounters, and the child that grew within her. Mark's initial shock melted into anger, his eyes blazing with a fury Clara had never seen before. He listened, his face a mask of disbelief and disgust, until Clara could bear it no longer. She waited, her heart in her throat, for the explosion she knew was coming. When Mark finally spoke, his voice was cold, his words cutting like a knife through the air. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Both of you. I never want to see either of you again." Clara felt her world shatter into a million pieces, her heart breaking into a symphony of pain. Rachel's smug expression was the last thing she saw before she was thrust out into the cold, drenching rain. The house that had once been her sanctuary was now a prison she'd never returned to. Rachel, unbothered by Mark's wrath, had her arms slung over Clara's shoulder, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Clara's thoughts swirled like the storm around them as Rachel led her to a small cottage on the edge of town, a place Rachel had apparently been preparing for them. Rachel spoke in soothing tones, but Clara's mind was a maelstrom of emotion. She was torn between anger and despair, love and resentment, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave Rachel. Not now, not when their fates were so inextricably linked by the child she carried. As they settled into their new home, Clara wondered what kind of future awaited them, a future built on deceit and the ashes of her shattered dreams. In the months that followed, Clara's belly grew, a constant reminder of Rachel's victory. Rachel took care of her, tending to her every need, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being a captive, a plaything in Rachel's twisted game. Rachel reveled in her newfound power, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction whenever Clara flinched at her touch. Yet there were moments of tenderness, Moments when Rachel would stroke Clara's hair and whisper sweet nothings into her ear, moments that made Clara's resolve waver. She knew that Rachel was toxic, a serpent in their Garden of Eden, but she couldn't help the warmth that blossomed in her chest when Rachel looked at her with something that resembled affection. The tension between them grew, a simmering pot ready to boil over at any moment. Clara's resentment grew with each passing day, but so did her love for the child that grew within her. Rachel had taken everything from her home, her husband, her dignity, but Clara was determined to give this innocent life the best she could, even if it meant being forever bound to the woman who had destroyed her happiness. As the due date approached, Clara made a silent vow to protect her child no matter the cost. The storm clouds of their past hovered over them, but Clara clung to the hope that somehow she could still find a way to forge a future filled with love and acceptance for her unborn child. But the path ahead was fraught with challenges, and Clara knew she would have to navigate them with the strength of a lioness protecting her cub. Rachel's manipulation and control were relentless, and Clara was beginning to realize that escaping her grasp would be more difficult than she ever imagined.